So I want to play a clip for you before I get into anything. And I know this is episode 400. Normally I become more reflective and everything, and I am going to go in that direction. But first, before I get into all of that, I want to play a clip that's been particularly monumental in me thinking about what I'm going to discuss on this episode. So here it is.
Here's the simplest dating advice you'll ever need in your life, but most of you won't listen because you guys like to argue and complain about stupid shit that is very easy to understand. That person that has inconsistent communication with you just doesn't like you that much. That person that ghosted you isn't a bad person. They just became uninterested or found someone else. Move on, find someone else to text you. If your partner cheated on you, leave them. And if you don't leave them, which most of you won't because most of you lack standards and self-respect, shut up about it, stop hanging it over their head, and learn how to work through it together. Or else, move on. If a man does not want to pay all your bills and wants to go 50-50, that doesn't make him a bum, that doesn't make him a bad guy, that doesn't make him a little boy. He's still a man, just a man with different interests and goals in life. Go find you someone who will. There's 8 billion people in the world, I promise you can find one. That woman that wants all her bills paid doesn't make her a gold digger, doesn't make her a slut. Just go find you one that could do 50-50 with you. It's very simple. She just doesn't want what you want, and that's okay. You cannot attract the type of person you want if you are also not the person that they want. Get off the couch if you want a gym rat. Open up a fucking book if you want someone who reads books a lot. It's very simple. Men aren't shit, your standards are. You attract what you are, so maybe it's time to do some self-reflection. Most men under 30 don't have their shit together, and that's okay. Stop letting social media fill up your head with these unrealistic standards. This one is gonna ruffle some feathers. Men have it way harder in life than we do, especially when it comes to money. So stop being a 25-year-old woman wondering why this 25-year-old man can't bust his coochie open online for $10,000 a month. It just does not work that way for men. Believe people when they show you who they are, the first time. You do not get to choose or change the way someone decides to love you. You simply sit down, shut up, observe, and decide whether you want to participate in the way that they love or not. At the end of the day, we are all humans who have imperfect designs, so stop trying to find that perfect person. They don't exist, and that thing you hate about them, you probably hate about yourself. Don't take advice from married people or single people. Take advice from happy people. But even that's hard to find sometimes because most people lie to themselves about what actually makes them happy. Stop coming into relationships with a lacking mindset. You have a hard time finding the end-all be-all person because you yourself are not the end-all be-all person. So do some self-work, shut up
and get off the internet. I think that's what she was trying to finish with, because that's sort of what I read. Now, when I saw this particular video, it was actually posted up on Twitter, and the person who had posted it up had said, and I quote, "She just cancelled everyone's relationship podcast schedules for the rest of the year," end quote. Now, when I actually encountered this video, which was a little over a month ago, I was preparing for Tweet Street, and I actually sort of looked at it, and I had sort of already started preparing my comebacks and, breaking down that that's not everything, there's a lot more to it, blah, blah, blah. But while I was doing a lot of that preparation, I kind of stopped for a second because something kind of hit me. Because as I was doing prep for the episode and everything, with like the clip and all, I was actually looking through the comments, something which I normally do. And a lot of people were agreeing with what it is that the person who posted up this video said. And, they were all talking about how they hate relationship podcasts and they wish that they would just end. And it actually sort of just made me stop and think for a bit, because I don't think the problem is that, this video didn't capture everything, or it was too general, or it seemed like it was giving a lot of information, but this, but that. It was the fact that people agreed because people just didn't like the idea of relationship podcasts anymore. And it's something that I've seen crop up a lot more every single time I'm looking through clips and comments. Because after you see a clip somewhere, if it's on IG, if it's on TikTok, and there's a bunch of comments there, you're just seeing people saying, "When will these podcasts end? I'm so tired of relationship podcasts. Please save the Black community or Africans or Kenyans from relationship podcasts or relationship topics and give them something else to discuss and, get them off of the shackles of stuff like this." People are even saying that you should ban selling equipment to like podcasters and all because this is all they're making. And I see this crop up again and again and again. And it's become such a constant thing that I see in comment sections that I'm almost not surprised when I find it. Hell, I'm actually expecting at least a good percentage of those comments to be stuff like this. which kind of did bring up the question, which, of course made this episode, which is, do we really need relationship podcasts anymore? Because these things have really, really sprung up, especially over the past 3 years. Relationship podcasts have been crawling out of the woodwork. They're popping up everywhere. People who are busy talking about, regular shit, day-to-day things, society and all. It's like they all just end up gravitating towards relationship podcasting, and it's just people talking about relationships time and time and time again. And so, granted, when you hear a lot of people busy saying that they don't like them anymore, I can sort of understand it. Which is why, like I said earlier, the big question probably should be, do we need relationship podcasts? And, well, because it's not the end of the episode, I guess, y'all are going to have to listen to a bit of an explanation before I get to the answer. But to kind of kick things off, I just want to start by saying that I understand. Like, when I see a bunch of people saying that they dislike it so much, they're tired of relationship topics, I actually understand. As someone who's been podcasting for around 4 years, because the podcast turns 4 in July the 15th, and this entire time it's just been me talking about relationships 99.9% of the time. Like, I have seen podcasts come and go. I have seen podcasts spring up, especially during COVID, just talking about relationships to the point where sometimes even I get tired of actually looking at some of the content. And when you see a lot of those clips coming up, when you see a lot of those clips being shelved around, being posted up on like sites for big reach and everything, and also being recommended because they tend to pull the most eyeballs with some of the opinions that are thrown there, I can actually understand why. And it's a pretty big part of the reason why a lot of people don't like relationship podcasts. It's because a lot of people just find a lot of relationship podcast clips that are posted up on social media sites the entire bloody time. You're on a social media site, you're on IG, you're on Twitter, you're on Facebook, and at some point as you're busy scrolling through, you'll just find some clip from some podcast that you probably don't know about, or maybe even you do, and they're saying something that offends one gender or is an extremely wild take, so it's supposed to garner some sort of attention or reaction from people, or it's just some mundane shit that's being taken out of context. Like, you'll just hear stuff like that being shelved at you every single time. Like, you don't see as much from business podcasts, you don't see as much from some of the self-help podcasts, you don't see a lot of that from just about any other genre besides relationship podcasts. And you can blame social media for that, you can blame the sites and the algorithms and everything, but with the fact that there's so many people doing relationship podcasts and a lot of them are arguing about roughly the same things, I can understand why that's the case. And to kind of give you a bit of an explanation as to why that actually happens, it's, of course, well, there's the social media algorithms and everything, but also it's the fact that during COVID, a fuck ton of people started podcasts. A lot of people sat down, they looked at it, they were like, oh shit, we can have, interesting debates and conversations around particular things. Okay, what can we do? And when they realized that podcast equipment was particularly affordable, at least by a lot of people's standards, they just went out and they started getting equipment. And a lot of these guys invested in audio and video equipment, so that's what you end up seeing. And when you're looking at topics to discuss, why not go for in what some people would look at as the most low-hanging fruit that you can probably get into, which is relationships? Because you think about it, relationships, or at least relationship matters, are things that affect each and every one of us, not unless if you're 100% antisocial, of which even then I do tend to think that some things will affect you. Like, it's stuff that affects everyone, it's stuff that can be discussed by everyone. There's not that much research to be done, and a lot of the information that you can get from other people, so it's very easy content fodder to mine from. And also, a lot of the outlooks that you give, you can just do it from your own life experiences. And if it's similar to someone else's, they'll agree with you. If it's not similar, someone can disagree with you and it can start a debate and it'll just cause more discussion. So essentially, it just works really well as a point of content. And, some people would describe it as low-hanging fruit, which by this definition makes it seem very much so. So as a result, you find that most people who went ahead and started a podcast didn't even focus on any profession that they're in or even business, which a lot of people preach nowadays. They just went into relationships because relationships are just that easy to get into. And so when you kind of look at it, with a lot of these people who've been starting all of these podcasts, all of them discussing relationships with all of these wild views and, very biased takes that can sometimes just be generated to draw a certain amount of eyeballs or a certain amount of reactions from people and trigger others. And all of these over things that you can probably resolve just by, I guess, good communication with your partner. And, just doing a little bit of soul searching and maybe discussing it with a few people. Do we really need relationship podcasts? Well, I'm not going to drag this answer any longer for you guys because I know it's not the end of the episode, but I don't see why I need to hold it out for so long. Well, the truth of it is you don't, Yeah. And I'm saying this as Denver B of Break Time on West Side podcast, which has been discussing relationships since day one. Yes, I will say it and I will say it again. We don't need relationship podcasts. And I'm perfectly okay saying that because when I look at a lot of these relationship podcasts and the fact that so many of these topics are just used and reused and overused and just blown out of proportion, to be quite honest, I don't think we really need them. I don't think we need relationship podcasts. But at the same time, I don't think we need a lot of other podcasts as well. I don't think we need business podcasts. I don't think we need finance podcasts. I don't think we need marketing podcasts. Hell, I don't think we need podcasts that show podcasters how to be better podcasters. I don't think we really need them all. Or, at the very least, most of them. But at the end of the day, we still do listen to them though, right? And if you think I'm about to start making a case for why it's so important to listen to relationship podcasts and blah, 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 well, I don't know if I'm really going to do that, though. What I am going to do, though, is say that I understand exactly how a lot of people feel and why they feel that way in relation to relationship podcasts, because they're the ones that get shared around so much. They're the ones that have a lot of these clips with these very wild thoughts, these very wild opinions that are thrown out, and some things that are just said which are just very, very wild, to say the least, by any measure of the word. And to be very honest, in as much as I do discuss relationships, so I am a relationship podcaster, I'll even tell you that I don't like a lot of them. Yes, you can say that it'll boil down to the clips, or maybe it's the fact that I probably don't listen to everything, or I haven't checked out too many of them. But even the few that I've tried to check out, even the few whose clips I've pulled, I don't enjoy them all that much. Some of them just have a lot of wild shit, a lot of which I usually think about and I'm like, it's not even worth discussing on any of my episodes. I kid you the fuck not. I have a ton of clips. I have so many clips that have been saved up all in the name of content in my contents folder, whether it's on IG, whether it's anywhere else. I have so many clips that have been pulled from different podcasts that just have so many wild things that I believe I could probably make a season, if not even more than that, worth of episodes just based off of those clips alone. But I usually choose not to. And it might not necessarily be a case where the situation isn't relevant to the dating scene in my area, or the topics being discussed are not relevant to me as a person or to my current generation or the people that I speak to. A lot of times what it is that is there is stuff that is relevant to me, or at least is relevant to the dating scene in Nairobi. It's relevant to people in relationships, whether I'm talking about Nairobi or the States or even the UK. It's a lot of stuff that actually is very relevant to the kind of audience that I am speaking to. But most times I will avoid them because sometimes the comments that are made are incredibly wild. sometimes whatever's being said is just a little too much, or at least it's just visibly trying to demean another gender, and I don't entirely think that it's worth discussing. And sometimes it's mostly because some of the topics that are being talked about are particularly overused, or should I say exhausted and spoken about and re-exhausted again. So it almost sounds like you're preaching to the choir or you're beating a dead horse. And to be very honest, a lot of those topics are the ones that I usually like to avoid, because there's nothing new to learn from it. There's nothing to really re-clarify or to add detail to. So at the end of the day, if that's all that I'm trying to talk about, then what makes me different from every single one of these people? And to be very honest, like, for me, if it's not something that I can learn, if it's not something that can allow me to grow in terms of knowledge, if at the very least I'm not going to entertain my audience, then I prefer to avoid it as well. Like, I don't mind the dilemma situations. I don't mind something that will test or challenge how we think about certain situations. But at the end of the day, like, whatever it is that I'm bringing in the name of content, I want to at least ensure that you get to pick something from it. And it's not just mindless hitting of the same topics and, talking points that are overused and pretty much ripped off of like 2-3 people before that. And as a result, I can say for a fact that me doing this podcast for close to 4 years, like, I've learned a fuck ton of things that I never really thought that I could. From topics that are into evolutionary psychology, to research that I never really thought is ever really done, to stats that I never really thought I'd pay too much attention to. Like, I feel like I've learned so much as an individual as well as a podcaster, and I hope that you as the listener have been learning the same, or at least you've been learning in roughly about the same speed, if not just picking a couple of bits here and there. Because at the end of the day, the only reason that I've gotten to learn so much, the only reason that I've managed to deep dive into certain topics and certain subjects and actually learn so much is because of you, the listener. You, the person that chooses to listen to Break Time on West Side when you're bored, when you're working, when you're driving home, whether you're on your public commute, like, wherever it is that you choose to listen to the podcast, and you choosing to listen to the podcast is a big part of the reason why I end up going to learn all of these new things, just so that I can come and give you something else that would probably make you enjoy the podcast a little bit more. And at the very least, I hope that that makes me a good content creator. I hope that that's made me a much better podcaster, and I hope that that's made your experience in listening to this podcast that much more worthwhile. And as such, even though I get that we don't need relationship podcasts, I hope that when you find mine, or when you see that I've released a new episode, that you at least want to listen to it out of your own choosing. Because I don't think that all relationship podcasts are bad, and I don't think that all relationship podcasts need to disappear and go. I just think that if a lot of them went beyond the hype of just talking about the typical relationship challenges that they see here and there, and pretty much running around the same circles and talking points that they have, then they'd probably be a lot better. And it would probably bring back a lot of the lost flair that was there when people were talking about relationships and it was actually an interesting topic base. But all in all, with all of that said, I hope that with your dislike for relationship podcasts and everything, you at least get to save a little bit of love for me, or at least for the content that I make. And I hope that you've been learning a lot from whatever content that I've been making. And I hope that you stick around and, hopefully we can learn some more. But all in all, I thank and appreciate each and every one of you that chooses to listen to this podcast. Each and every one of you that clicks on a link or decides to listen from whatever app they're using. I appreciate each and every one of you immensely. I really appreciate y'all that give the feedback, whether it's physical and you find me somewhere and you talk about liking the podcast, or even the virtual ones, because you guys do give the feedback the most virtually. I appreciate each and every one of you. Like, don't get me wrong, I do not take any of the feedback or any of the listens for granted. And I hope that in all of this hate for relationship podcasts, that the guy that talks about guy shit in relationships from a guy's perspective, or at least a young guy's perspective, is probably not going to be among the hated ones. And you will continue listening to this podcast where I normally start by saying, welcome to Break Time on West Side, your number one Break Time podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. The man on the mic is Sir Denver B. I thank each and every one of you for listening all through the 400 episodes, even though you've listened to just one. I don't know if we're going to stop this at 500 episodes, but while we work towards getting to those 500 episodes, I hope the ride will be as much fun and as much of a wild one as the past 400 have been, and I hope that you're going to be there with me. So, while I work on all that, I will catch you guys on the next break. Take care.